To drive me out of her party, my merciless mother-in-law poisoned me during pregnancy. Her side was taken by my spouse. I thus performed what none anticipated. Though my mother-in-law just attempted to poison me last week, I find it unbelievable that I am even writing this. For her own birthday celebration, my mother-in-law hosts. She consistently goes all out for her birthdays throughout the years. Every year is a great celebration. This year was no different. With all the bells and whistles, she chose to throw a cowboy-themed party. Everyone going had to dress fully in cowboy clothes, thinking boots, caps, flannel shirts. It was more than a laid-back get-together. She really expected everyone to turn up and participate actively. Currently pregnant with my first kid, the road has not been the simplest one so far. I've been rather tired, partially from anemia I'm experiencing throughout the pregnancy. This implies that I have to be somewhat cautious about the degree of my effort. I strive to prevent needless worry, and to be honest, I have recently missed quite a few social events to give my health first priority. Attending gatherings or parties just seems like a lot right now, particularly when I should be resting more than normal. My mother-in-law contacted my husband a few days before the celebration and made a huge issue about how definitely I had to be there. She pushed him so hard, claiming that my attendance was required and that I couldn't just miss this function, using the same kind of justification I used for prior family gatherings. She made it plain that she expected me to show up no matter how tired I was. Hence, even though I didn't feel up to it, I felt like I had no option but to go to maintain peace. It was either that or cope with even more tension from her mocking me about my later on absence. I told my husband, Nate, straight out on the day of her birthday celebration before we went, that I wasn't going to be around if I started feeling sick or uncomfortable anywhere. I assured him, should things become too taxing, I would straight go home. Even vowing to come back with me should I choose to go, he appeared to grasp and concur totally. That helped me to relax for the latter event. Several family members met us right away as we got to the location. People began flocking to me, patting my tummy and chatting to my belly in those babyish too-sweet tones, as if the baby could somehow hear and react, as is frequently the case when you're pregnant. Kind but yet a little overpowering, they flocked about me, congratulating me on soon being a mother. My mother-in-law just grinned at me, gave my husband a quick embrace, and then turned to go see her friends. She hardly spoke to me at all. She appeared anxious to meet her visitors and savor the celebrations she had scheduled. She was clearly in full party host mode, mingling and absorbing the attention of every person in attendance. Several family members and visitors were often approaching me during the first half of the party to either discuss the pregnancy or offer me different advice on becoming a first-time parent. When I at last found a quiet place to sit down, I was happy to be able to regain my breath. I gently attempted to leave the throng so I could have a respite. Luckily, Robin, my husband's cousin, dropped by to keep me company. Robin and I have always got along quite well. Growing up, she and my husband were very close. Hence, naturally, as I married into the family, we were close too. Among the few individuals who really understand me, she is one. She also understands how much I have been avoiding social gatherings recently, particularly since I'm pregnant. She made a joke, as she sat down next to me, expressing how surprised she was to see me at the party, given how frequently I had been staying home. She hinted that mother-in-law would have surely given my husband and her an earful for allowing me get away with it if I hadn't shown there. Knowing that was true, we both chuckled at that. If I had missed her birthday celebration, my mother-in-law would have had something to say, as she is not quiet about expressing her unhappiness when things do not go as planned. Suddenly coming over while we were still talking, catching up on life and the pregnancy, was my mother-in-law. She just looked me up and down, then without any thought informed me how different I looked from the last time she saw me. She neither sat down or participated in the discussion. Her phrasing caught me a little off target, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to reply. For background, my mother-in-law seldom sees us at home, even though she lives in the same city as us. She doesn't appear to like visiting for some reason, not as if she is far away. Almost every other weekend, my husband and I used to go see her somewhat often. However, I have had to cut down on those trips since I became pregnant, as it has been rather taxing. Given all I've been going through, I felt it would have been great if mother-in-law had come to see me instead. However, she never came. She last saw me in person perhaps 2 or 3 months ago. Hence it is logical that I would have changed. Pregnancy has been wearing me. Naturally, I appear different today than I did a few months ago. Still, her pointing out of it seemed a little strange. Then mother-in-law asked directly. I looked so much fatter than usual. I started to feel embarrassed right away. I laughed awkwardly, trying to play it off, but within I felt self-conscious and uncomfortable. Fortunately, Robin hurried to defend me. She pointed to my expanding tummy and gently reminded mother-in-law that I was pregnant after all, and naturally would gain weight. Mother-in-law, on the other hand, seemed unaffected. She really laughed, almost dismissively, and responded with a certain haughtiness that she never carried while she was expecting my husband. She went on to say about how sluggish I appeared for simply sitting about throughout the party without interacting with the guests, adding that she had been very active and full of energy while she was pregnant. It seems like nothing. Her analogy seemed like a direct attack on me, as if she were saying I wasn't managing pregnancy as well as she had. I could not sit there silently any longer. I pushed back, underlining how obviously her circumstances differed from mine. She was relatively young when she became unintentionally pregnant after high school and dropped out of college to become a full-time mother. I am in late mid-30s and have existing medical problems. Pregnancy will consequently have various effects on me. Given the situation, my body naturally requires extra rest. She seemed to not take it well the minute I highlighted the variations. Her cheeks reddened, obviously insulted by my answer. Reminding her about her background seems to have crossed the line. Robin saw the tension building and hurried to gently guide the discussion in another path. Pointing out the decorations, theme, and work involved in planning everything, she praised mother-in-law on how great her party was. That appeared to work because mother-in-law grabbed upon the chance to brag about herself. She began praising her own party, ranting somewhat about how she had come up with such an innovative concept regarding the theme of her party all on her own, and how appreciative she was to her pals for helping to put it together. She then went off to hang around with her other pals, which made me glad the uncomfortable talk had apparently been overlooked. My husband handled fetching the cake for mother-in-law when it was time for the cutting. He put the cake precisely on top, and we gathered around to sing for her. Of course, mother-in-law gleamed with pride and absorbed the attention. Then my father-in-law and husband requested me to come stand with them close to mother-in-law for photographs and movies. Mostly as I was already feeling exhausted, I wasn't that interested in it, but I complied since they looked determined. People started gathering around to compliment us both. As I went to be next to mother-in-law for the pictures, they said things like, "Oh, you two look absolutely lovely together. You might be sisters." Some even joined in. "We can't wait for the kid to come. It's going to be so amazing," and joked how mother-in-law is going to be a grandmother very soon. Hearing this, I could notice the countenance of mother-in-law change very little. Her eyes glowed with a flickering displeasure. Though meant from the visitors, The sister analogy appeared to touch her personally. She obviously wanted the focus to be only on her. Hence it seemed as if it was now being split, and she did not value this. She was kind and smiled for the cameras, but I could see the tension rising. Honestly, I wanted the entire picture session to end. Particularly on her big day, I didn't want to pilfers any of her thunder. Later at lunch, I was almost done when I found 3 of mother-in-law's friends in the kitchen around me. Her friends began chatting about how the pregnancy was making my complexion radiant, and about how mother-in-law looked precisely like me in those days. Not really participating, but trying my best to be courteous, I nodded and smiled gently. Then mother-in-law abruptly cut off their talk with a contemptuous attitude. She said she looked nothing like me while pregnant, therefore negating their comments. She underlined and pointed out how, due to my pregnancy, I had fat arms and ugly-looking calves, something she claimed never to have happened for her. As I struggled to retain my cool, her remarks hurt, and I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. Her friends began to mock her, however, reminding her of how she had really gained weight and how much hair she had lost throughout her pregnancy, almost rendering her virtually bald at one point. They even laughed over her droopy arms, remembering those days. The look on mother-in-law changed from smug delight to barely hidden wrath. Her table had twisted on her. Mother-in-law sat there obviously boiling, her friends still remembering her pregnancy. They knew her since college, hence they had first-hand knowledge of her appearance back then, and they weren't holding back. Mother-in-law had been working hard to make me feel ashamed in front of her friends, but she had ended up being the one ashamed by the very people who knew her best. Though their honest recollections were sufficient to undermine mother-in-law's effort to embarrass me, they weren't being nasty. For me, it was a little but surprising triumph. Therefore I stayed silent and let her stew simmer in the discomfort of the moment. Later, hoping they would leave me alone, I gently excused myself from the group, stating I really needed to use the loo. My mother-in-law startled me, however, when I came out of the restroom. She inquired if I was feeling okay, and I, not wanting to exacerbate anything, just told her the meal had been a little too heavy for me. She laughed then, almost as if she had been waiting for a chance to strike. She said maybe I should simply go back home if I wasn't feeling well without skipping a beat. Her voice sounded dismissive, like she was trying to get me out of the celebration, not sympathetic or worried. Her direct approach startled me, but I gently assured her I was feeling quite well and that I could remain for a little longer, because I wanted to satisfy her belief she could simply send me packing. Then she doubled down and advised me not to stress myself out by remaining even a minute longer. As if eager to get me out of there, she even volunteered to call me an Uber again. I gently turned down, assuring her my husband would take me home when it was time to go. She countered that her son needed to be at her birthday celebration, that his presence was vital, but that my presence was not needed anymore. She had been the one to insist on my participation in the first place. Hence, her comments made it very evident that she felt I was somehow invading her particular day. I began becoming annoyed, as she kept telling me I could simply go. So I questioned her straightforwardly why she now wanted me to leave so desperately. She dropped the front at that point. She told me precisely what I had suspected, that my pregnant belly was taking front stage on her birthday. She said that all anybody at the party could speak about was the baby, when this was meant to be her day. She made it plain that she had only wanted me here so that people wouldn't question her about my absence. But now that I had shown my face to everyone, she felt that the right thing for me to do now would be to leave so that she could enjoy the rest of her party without feeling as though I was depriving her of the attention she deserved. Her words hurt. I had not gone to her party to take anything away from her, but now she was making me feel as if my pregnancy was somehow an affront, as though my entire existence was spoiling her day. Hearing her utter such things infuriated and wounded me. She was intimidated by the fact that others were displaying enthusiasm over the infant. Hence here she was almost shoving me out of the door, overwhelmed by what had just transpired with mother-in-law and her friends. I turned back and determined I had to locate my husband, Nate, right now. I moved over to see him conversing with other people across the room. He was as startled as I informed him when I got to him that mother-in-law had made it plain she wanted me to go. I told him everything when he inquired if anything had occurred between us to set her off, how mother-in-law attempted to humiliate me in front of her friends, and how she had been making nasty comments about my appearance that had backfired on her. As I told the tale, Nate was obviously offended. He replied right away he will go to figure things out and spoke to her. He returned and informed me his mother was simply in one of her moods, and I should not take it seriously. I had no idea what he and his mother talked afterwards. She apparently had allowed me remain during the whole party. Starting to become annoyed with his mother's antics, I informed my husband I wanted to go. Nate offered to bring me back home, however, and persuaded me to remain just 1 hour longer. I stupidly nodded. A short while later, mother-in-law approached me once more, this time with a dish of cake, as I was attempting to savor the remainder of the evening with Robin. She seemed a little quieter than usual. She stated that she had a couple too many drinks that had presumably had an impact on her, and told me she felt awful about the way she had talked to me earlier. Review. Saying it was her way of letting go the tension between us, she presented the cake as a peace offer. I just graced her with a courteous smile, thanks, and sliver of cake. The cake didn't seem incorrect at first, but after a few minutes something weird started to feel like. It began gently, only a little amount of pain, but it soon upped speed. I started to find it difficult to catch my breath, as my throat felt as if it was gradually shutting up. I started fanning my chest, attempting to dislodge anything I thought could be trapped, initially wondering maybe I had eaten something incorrect, and reflexively set down the dish. Robin seemed worried as well. The sensation became stronger, and before I knew it, I was out of my chair, gasping for air, frightened as it grew harder and harder to breathe. Beside me, Robin was yelling, asking what was wrong. Fear gripping my gut, I was kneeling. My kid came first in my thoughts. I was afraid for my unborn kid as much as for myself. I just wanted my kid to be all right. I had no concern about what happened to me. I saw Nate sprinting toward me in the blur of fright, his face covered with terror. But everything after that got fuzzy. The following morning I woke up in a hospital bed. Not sure of anything, I saw Nate seated next to me, though there was something else in his expression, guilt. He seemed so glad to see me waking. Having spent a lot of time with him, I sensed it immediately. He told me how I had passed out, and had hurried me over to the hospital even before I asked him what had occurred. He reassured me I would be okay, as well as the baby would be. He mentioned only this. He said nothing more. Later I started to put together what had really transpired when the doctor visited to chat to me. The doctor clarified that my body had reacted this way, as I most certainly had been poisoned. Painted? My brain would not let me grasp it. When the doctor asked me what I had eaten before the episode, I thought of the cake mother-in-law had given me. I contacted the doctor about it. He told me the cake could have had soy, a substance I am very sensitive to. I started to become startled. As everyone in my husband's family is aware of my soy allergy, I am very confident the cake at mother-in-law's celebration did not include soy, as I had a slice earlier, even before mother-in-law had presented it to me. But the doctor was now claiming that the cake most certainly had soy, which set off the strong allergic response. I was shocked, perplexed, and really afraid. How then could this have happened? I turned to study my husband, Nate, who had remained silent all through. The doctor left himself, giving us some peace, and I seized the chance to express the question that had been niggling at me since I awakened. Really, did the cake include soy? I pushed, very convinced I needed to know. Nate paused, his eyes straying from mine, as if he were unwilling to respond. I urged him to let go, as I sensed he was holding back. Kindly just tell me the truth, I pleaded. Following a quiet, he at last came clean. He hurried to find out what had occurred when he saw me fall, and discovered from the visitors that mother-in-law had been the one handing me the cake I was eating. As he related the conflict he had with her, his voice shook just slightly. His mother emotionally acknowledged that she had put only a few drops of soy milk to the cake before handing it to me when he questioned her about it. For what reason? She wanted me to feel a little sick so that I could simply go home and the guests would stop chatting about my baby at her party. The knowledge that she had purposefully placed me in danger just to get me away from her silly birthday celebration made my stomach plummet. Her acts, pure hate, made me mute and caused an intense flash of wrath. My feelings erupted, and I vowed to sue his mother for poisoning me and for placing me in a life-or-death scenario wherein I may have lost my kid. But my rage seemed legitimate. While he realized that what his mother did was bad, Nate told me he didn't want her jailed and battled with me to not move further. He still says, "You have to consider this before making such a big decision and reporting my mother even now as I'm writing this." His comments seem like a smack in the face, and I find it difficult to understand how he could ever support her behavior in any form. He believes that this is a family affair and that we should work things out without calling cops. Eta wants to document my mother-in-law after what she has done to me. Update number 1. 2 days separate have gone since my previous update. Following everything that had transpired, my parents, who reside in another city, decided to travel in to be with me while I recovered at home. Hearing about the occurrence, they were naturally disturbed and somewhat worried. The minute they learned the specifics, they wanted me to go immediately to the police station to report mother-in-law. And that's precisely what we did, at last acting, I sense, release. When Nate saw what we had done later, he lost all sense of reason and began lecturing my parents and me how we shouldn't have gone so far without first consulting him first. It was as if a switch turned off in him. He argued that his mother had no bad intentions toward me and started reminding me of all the times mother-in-law had allegedly assisted me, which seemed completely absurd considering she barely ever visited or provided any actual assistance throughout my pregnancy. My mother, who had been trying to keep cool, told him forcefully that as my husband, he needed to develop a spine and stand up for me and our kid, instead of pandering to his mother and attempting to protect her when what she did to me was a crime. My dad said, "Nate, your mother decided to poison my pregnant daughter. You should be more concerned about your wife and pregnant kid than you are standing here debating your crazy relatives. What if your mother felt scared by others discussing your wife's pregnancy, so your wife perished? Should such be the case, then why did your mother invite her in the first place?" Her comments really hit home, and I could understand Nate's instant humiliation. He tried to argue more, but my folks weren't game. They insisted that my health and our baby's protection come first, and stayed their position. I owe my parents so much for their support. Now that I see the gravity of what has transpired, I need my husband to hopefully choose our family above his mother. This is beyond a birthday celebration gone bad now. It is about the security and welfare of our expanding family. What if tomorrow his mother damages our kid because she is again envious of us? What will we do then? Update 2. I forgot to mention this earlier in my previous post, but yes, mother-in-law has phoned to apologize to me repeatedly after the event. Each time I have merely ignored her. I'm not ready to accept her apologies, particularly not when they seem so fake and forced. Meanwhile, Nate has been moping about the house, refusing to speak to me. He's emphasized how I'm being a party pooper for making his mother feel horrible and guilty after her many apologies. He told me I should endeavor to be a better daughter-in-law by letting this thing slip for the benefit of his family. It seems frustrating to hear my husband say that. He appears more worried about his mother's sentiments than my health and safety. I'm really contemplating leaving him. Update 3. It's been a month and a half since my previous update. Thanks to everyone's ideas, I have filed for divorce from my spouse because our relationship simply continues getting worse and worse. You know, my mother-in-law was detained since the evidence against her was overwhelming after my filing of a police complaint. Multiple witnesses, including Robin, verified that she had been the one to offer me the cake. While questioning, mother-in-law also admitted to adding soy into my cake so that she might purposefully make me ill. As a consequence, she was charged with endangerment and willfully inflicting physical injury to both myself and my kid. Ever after her imprisonment and subsequent bail, Nate and my in-laws have continued to blame me for putting my dear mother-in-law through such a horrible time. Instead of rallying behind me at such a painful moment, they are choosing to sympathize with the person who willfully jeopardized my life and the lives of our kid. My husband's unwillingness to support my side has been very hurtful. Therefore, I think divorcing him is the only alternative left. Hence, in light of all this, my parents and I took the painful decision that I needed to return home with them, where I would feel much safer. There was no assurance that his mother or his relatives wouldn't turn up and cause me further grief, particularly considering the combustible nature of the issue. However, when Nate found out about my intentions to leave him and move back in with my parents, he got hostile. He went on a tirade about how I was destroying everything, and that all I had to do was just keep my lips shut and let the issue go so that we could put everything to rest. He accused me of making things worse by taking his kid away from him when he was already losing his mother. To address some of your concerns, Nate has always had a quick temper, similar to his mother, but since the event, his wrath has only escalated towards me. Currently, I am at my parents' house and feel more safer to be away from him. Father-in-law has apologized to me for what his wife did, but much like Nate, he feels that I betrayed them by going to the police. He informed me that I could have simply talked things over with the family. Mother-in-law has always been self-centered, but she has never physically assaulted me this way. So, this is the first time that anything like this has occurred, but I don't want to ever give her another opportunity. Since the event, I have been struggling to even consume food because I can't shake the dread that someone would poison me again, even though my parents are usually careful, and I trust them totally. The emotional toll this act has had on me is something my mother-in-law will never be able to repay. Update 5. I think it's been a couple months since my previous update. I've given birth and both my kid and I are doing well. The divorce with my ex-husband was speedy due to the prenup we had in place. He is still unhappy with me about what has happened to his mother and blames me totally for her punishment. Other than child support, he made it apparent that he wanted nothing to do with our kid. Hence, I've been given complete custody, and Nate has signed away all his parental rights. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she got an 8-month prison term and was sentenced to pay a substantial fine, along with paying all my medical expenditures and treatment linked to the event. I've also acquired a restraining order against her, guaranteeing that she can never come near me or my kid again. I'm living at my parents' place for now, where we're both protected and supported. I feel a feeling of comfort knowing that I can raise my kid in a safe setting. Until I can get a job and start living on my own, I will remain here.